Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. We continue forward with more Sage, but, you know, the more I play specifically Sage, I'm starting to notice, comparing to the session I had as Warrior a while back, that as a healer, there's very little to talk about if nothing happens. Where, as a tank, there can be something to talk about even if nothing special happens, at least in my experience. Because of that, maybe I'll bring out a tank again next time. With that said, this time around we have 12 duties, and once again there's a strong concentration of dungeon duties. Something that I think might be significant here is that I have so far done my Mentor Roulette sessions in the afternoon, which makes it a lot more likely that roulettes like 50, 60, 70, 80 is lacking players. And makes it a lot less likely people are queuing for extremes at all. I'm not 100% certain of this, but I do think I might have to try doing Mentor Roulette sessions at different times of the day to see if this makes a tangible difference. Now, with that said, the first duty, as you can see, is Castrum Meridianum, and my first observation here, which might be a bit random, is that the pace at which damage is taken, combined with the healing requirements of the duty, makes this particular duty amazing for practicing healing enough. Figure out how much healing your options provide, and then wait until they're actually needed before doing anything. Another thing that I noticed is that the tank was really good about using their cooldowns, including using Aurora what seemed like on cooldown, which is uncommon. Also, the Bard turned out to be a first-timer and had some minor issues with dealing with getting aggro on enemies, which I spoke about in the previous Mentor Roulette video, but hey, they were new in a new place and they did do just fine overall. Finally, right at the end on the final boss, I realized the ninja was doing single target dotons, so I tried to approach them about it, but they immediately left. For duty 2, we landed in Shisui of the Violet Tides. The paladin was apparently a first-timer, but they did have max level equipment from max level content, so I would have liked to see a bit more defensive cooldowns from them. On the plus side, they didn't pull more than 2 packs at a time, which was low enough intensity that I could manage. It also seemed all 3 of my party members had some issues with the boxes on the second boss, which also culminated in me intervening to protect the machinist when the chase AoEs came around. Beyond this, the duty went just fine. For duty 3, we go to Copperbell Mines, which is a duty where sages have an astounding amount of buttons to press. The tank and Bard in the group seemed to know exactly what to do, so we rushed through at an excellent pace. However, I did notice that the Thaumaturge, which by the way was a legitimately super new player it seemed, was completely lost in terms of rotation. I asked if I could give a tip, which conveniently coincided with a point in the duty where it wouldn't be a problem if I was a bit inactive, especially because the tank was solid. I'm reasonably confident the tank was queued with the Thaumaturge, partly because they encouraged the Thaumaturge to take the advice. As they were saying yes, I explained the absolute basics of the Black Mage rotation, of alternating properly between fire and ice. I also mentioned thunder, but let them know they would already improve massively by just doing the fire and ice thing right. It seemed they got it and immediately started doing better. At the end of the duty, I also suggested they could check my guide for new starting Black Mages in case they wanted more advice at their own pace, because they did seem to be very lost. I imagine it would be super helpful if they could learn exactly at the pace they need. For duty 4, we go to Dzemael Darkhold, and oops, we have a pugilist. Well, let's see, is that by accident? And indeed, they had forgotten, reason being, they were on a different PC. This actually makes very good sense, since your gear sets and your hotbars are saved locally for some reason. So they might have put on their monk weapon, had to fix their hotbars, and assuming they weren't that high level yet, they wouldn't be missing that many monk actions by being pugilist. Moving on, the tank might have viewed a boss guide, but otherwise be a first-timer. They could probably have used a bit more defensive cooldowns, but they were also pulling carefully, which greatly compensates in such a situation. I would add that on the final boss, we had a bit of a surprise when the tank started to spin the boss, probably in an attempt to dodge the frontal cone tank buster, but that's very dangerous. For duty 5, Stone Vigil. Both the tank and the samurai might well have been first-timers, but their performances were in completely different universes. The tank did okay, not the greatest on defensive cooldown usage, but overall was limiting themselves and not pulling too big, and also waited for the group instead of just rushing ahead. There was a point where they used single target when there were plenty of enemies, but then later changed back. So I have a feeling that perhaps they were experimenting a bit with what works and what doesn't, given they have a solid healer to hold them up. They also, in general, seemed like a curious player, so I'm sure they will improve given time. Now, the samurai, on the other hand, I'm not even sure what to say. They often just stood there during AoE pulls, or at times even just ran past. They didn't seem to really grasp boss mechanics at all, and didn't seem to learn from being hit either, and didn't seem to understand their toolkit in the slightest. There was so much here that I don't know where would start if they even understood me if I tried. For duty 6, weirdly, we go on to Stone Vigil hard. This duty normally can be a bit of a nightmare, especially because of the second boss, the big turtle and the cannons. But it seems everyone knew what to do, so we pushed through with relative ease. For those players that hate this duty because of the aforementioned turtle boss, here's some tips. Use the cannon, one each, and then use the buttons to attack. Don't try to target something else, as that will unseat you from the cannon. The first button is a spammable attack that you target on the ground, so make sure to aim it. The second attack stuns, and is intended to be used when the boss starts to cast a stomp. When Diamond Bag is used, simply stop attacking. You don't need to target the boss to check when it ends. Diamond Bag ends as the boss stops glowing, and then you can go back to attacking. When at spawn, remember that you can't attack enemies near you with the cannon, so it is much easier to attack the enemies going for your allies. Help each other. Finally, I repeat, remember that you cannot target something else while using the cannon. For duty 7, we got a speedy Ifrit normal, although the tank forgot to put on Iron Will, and the machinist was weirdly hanging out in Narnia, which would have been nice if they didn't, but that's a real big nitpick, and it did not matter. For duty 8, we got Ifrit hard. If I had a nickel for every time I got the hard version right after the normal version, just today, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Aside from that, not much to say. The run went fine. If you're looking at this and wondering why I'm spamming you Creation Prognosis, if you block the knockback fully with a barrier, then you don't get knocked back. And if I can sacrifice one of my GZDs to save every melee player 1 GZD, I would do it any day. Oh, also, this ends the 4-man content streak, capping off at 26. For duty 9, we go to Sastasha, where I have an absolutely impressive amount of actions. Nothing of note really happened in the duty, everything went fine. The most notable thing I could bring up is that the tank could easily have pulled way more than they did. But given that the only job in the group that had AoE at all was the tank, I kind of understand why they didn't. For duty 10, we're back in Dzemael Darkhold again, and it looks like a 3-man pre-made. And at least 2 of them also knew me, so naturally it's mega pull time. Throughout the duty, we had a bit of a talk about some glitches in relation to Final Fantasy XIV Mythbusters. Does anyone here know about this glitch in the Tempest in relation to mounts? Also, I do think it was for the best we didn't do the full Giga pulls where they were possible, since even if our tank here knew me, they might not know if I was ready for that. Better to take it a bit safe just to be sure. For duty 11, we have Hullbreaker Isle with what appears to be a tank and machinist first-timer. Overall, the duty went without a hitch, aside from this rather big pull at the start where we got a bit of a reminder that bees are dangerous. The duty didn't go super fast necessarily, however, the team had fun with it, and we even took a slight detour to pick up the minion here that my friend Aradil let me know exists. Now, on the final boss, I'm not sure what happened here, but suddenly the fight just devolved into total chaos. And it certainly didn't help that the tentacle really seemed to get quite excited to be everywhere and nowhere. We didn't wipe though. Finally, for duty 12, Sirensong Sea. It seemed like the tank wasn't feeling super confident, which was not exactly helped by what seemed to be 2 DPS players that were excessively enthusiastic and pulling for them sometimes. Overall, the duty went just fine despite this, although I was very confused as to how the seduce on the Wraith went through when we had no less than 2 interrupts that just didn't get used. So I mentioned this a bit at the start of the video as well, but the thing I really noticed about being Sage in Mentor Roulette is that my capacity to carry a group in most content seems to be so overwhelmingly helpful that I essentially enabled groups to get away with a lot of things that perhaps they shouldn't have. Of course, one really easy duty probably doesn't teach someone bad habits, so it isn't about that. The real problem is, and I mentioned this in the last Mentor Roulette video as well, if things are going just fine, and they are potentially because of me, it makes it really difficult to motivate or reason to tell someone to adjust their playstyle. If things are going fine, why do you need me to adjust? On top of this, and this is more the content creator in me speaking, if I am the reason why nothing interesting is happening because I prevent it from happening at the outset, wouldn't it make more sense for me to play a role that at least gives the space for the mistakes to breathe? With that, I think I might play tank again in Mentor Roulettes looking forward. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, the traps at the start of Hullbreaker Isle can actually affect enemies just as well as they can affect players. You just need to bait them into them. On the other hand, it also snares them, so maybe you'd rather they keep up as you round them up.